The fashion industry has, it's evolving, right? So, and we know that at least for Taylor, our business model is more circular, right? The circular fashion is it's a new buzzwords where the fast fashion, it's a scene, right? So it's changing. We see that just changing, and then so in the past, companies or big brands, they will use sustainable initiative, as part of their branding strategy. It's no longer the case, right? So now you see a lot of big brands, they have to be part of the business strategy, their regular business strategy. They have to address the environmental issues. They have to provide more sustainable option, to
Mm.
their consumers, even introducing buyback programs, right?
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Phoebe Tan. And Phoebe, we're going to be talking about a few different things today, including how to go about evaluating business models, how to work operations, how to set up and run a startup, and also talk probably a little bit about the lean operations concepts and how to use the least amount of resources to make the biggest impact. So definitely a lot of great discussion. With that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Phoebe.
Thank you, Devin.
Hey, excited to have you here. So I gave just kind of maybe a quick introduction, a little bit about the topics at hand, but just as a reminder to the audience, so Phoebe was on the Inventive Journey podcast, which is a sister podcast to this one, the Inventive Expert, and if so, definitely encourage everybody to go and check out her journey and find out more about her background. But for those listeners that haven't had a chance to catch the episode or saying, "Hey, I just want the condensed or the quick version of an introduction," why don't you introduce yourself a bit to the audience?
Sure, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Phoebe. I'm the founder of Taylor. Taylor is a two-sided circular fashion platform. On one hand, we help busy men to look great without buying clothes. On the other hand, we also help retail clothing partners and retailers to tap into the circular fashion model to help them to engage more sustainable channels and reach new customers that embrace more sustainable shopping options. So we started just couple years ago, and my co-founder and I decided to quit our corporate jobs. As for me, for the past 16 years, been wanting to start my own company, so I finally decided to join her and started Taylor last year, and we raised our first fundraising earlier this year. So it's been an interesting, rewarding journey with some challenges, of course, but happy to share.
Awesome. Well, that was definitely a great introduction and an awesome company. So with that, maybe just diving into a few of the topics at hand. The first one I think is, talking a little bit about how you go about evaluating business models, and I think that that one's certainly one where a lot of people that are wanting to do a startup or a small business, sometimes they'll either not know how to evaluate a business model, or they'll just jump over that because they're excited, want to get the business going, and never take that early step to make sure it's worthwhile to proceed. So for kind of both of those groups, how do you go about, if you have an idea, maybe you think it's worthwhile to pursue, or you think might be a great startup or small business, how do you go about evaluating the business model? How do you make that determination is worthwhile to pursue?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's a question I think a lot of startups have to ask themselves on day one, right? So there are different ways to do that. And when we first started pitching, the very first one of the slides that you will see in every single fundraising pitch deck is how big is the pie? What is the market size, right? So that's more like a top-down approach.
Mm-hmm.
So first, yeah, whatever problem you're trying to solve, right? You have to do a lot of research about, what is the pain point, what is the problem, right? Yeah, you look into the industry, how big is the current industry, if it is not a wide space. In our case, Taylor, right? So we are kind of in the fashion space, and then what in fashion space is huge in the US alone, right? You're talking about over $400 billion market size, right? Obviously, Taylor is not going to address the entire market size, not today, right? So you have to really narrow it down. What is the addressable market size in a sense, right? So for us, you look at the fashion world, so many different categories, and men, women, children, right? For us, because we focus on the menswear, so menswear represent about 30% of the entire pie, right?
Mm.
And then you have to break it down further. So what is our business model? Our business model is subscription, rental. So there's a lot of research data out there that will help you to get to the numbers, right? Answer the question, what is your addressable market? How big is the market? Whether it's a $10 billion size, $1 billion size, but it is very, very important very important question to ask yourself, right? Because if you are going after venture VCs monies, right? If you want to become a unicorns, you need a lot of money from the capital markets out there, right? So with that, they want to see a very scalable company. They want to know that it's a multi-billion business. It's going to grow once you figure it out, right? It's going to grow very fast, right? It's not very narrow, very small. It can be very niche in the beginning, but there's way to scale to expand the business model. That's yes, there's growth potential, and then that will attract the right investors. Really depend on what kind of startups you want to be, what kind of business. If you don't want to run a small company, then it's a different story.
No, and I think that's a lot of valid points. Now, one of them that you hit on that maybe to circle back to is, when you're looking at the addressable market, you typically, and typically in quotes, because I don't know, there's always a one size fits all. You'll have one of two issues with, especially if you're a first time entrepreneur, or you're just looking to get started, and you're less, less familiar with doing this business. You'll either look at the addressable market and you'll go way too big, meaning, kind of like if you're in the clothing market, well, everybody has to wear clothes. So we're selling our products everywhere around the world because everybody wears clothes. And, even with you guys' business model, it's not everyone. It's probably, it's men, and there's a certain or demographic of maybe age and maybe, income level, and maybe, where they're located. Is it the US, or is it Europe, or is it, China, or where it would be? And so you're going to have to start to narrow that down. So sometimes people will go way too broad and they'll just say everybody that's wearing clothes, or they'll go so narrow that it's like 5 people or at their actual target market, because they're going so narrow. Well, we're only for New York businessmen that are in, working on Wall Street, that like to wear suits and only wear black. And, then you narrow it so far that you're really not capturing what that could be the full market. So when you're looking kind of at that addressable market size, how do you figure out what is the right balance so you're not too narrow and you're not too broad?
No, that's right. That's right. I mean, the market size is only one part of the equation when you try to value a company, right? I have to say, yes, you have to look at the comparables, right? What are the companies out there, the players out there, right? That are doing similar. Maybe if you can find the similar business model, how big they are. If there are public companies out there very similar to your business model, that's a very good comparable, very close comparable, because you can just go to Yahoo Finance, what is your valuation, right? But if there's if we are, it's a brand new idea, right? So for example, metaverse, okay, how do you value, right, a metaverse startup, right? That's tough. That's tough. It definitely, yeah. It can be, you are trying to change the traditional industry. How much is the traditional industry worth? right? So there's no straight answer, but the easiest way is always find the closest comparables.
Hmm.
And so for us, our investor often compares to Stitch Fix, Run the Runway, right? And for us, yes, our business model is similar, but not the same, right? Stitch Fix, for example, is a subscription box, but they don't rent.
Mm.
Rent a Runway, for example, yes, it's a rental model, but they focus on women, right? So, that's one factor that you will have to consider comparable. Another thing is growth, right? So if we were to start Taylor 10 years ago, the valuation will be very different,
Mm.
right? So timing, growth, today the circular fashion, rental and resale is booming, right? Resale is growing 23 times, right? 23%, 11 times faster than the traditional retail or fashion retail industry as a whole, right? So it really depends on the timing. So you have to factor in the growth and to come out with the valuation. And for very early startup, typically also the market condition, right? So if the market is really hot, yes, there's more demand, there's more supply than demand, right? Then yes, you can have a higher valuation. That's why in the earlier stages, yeah, startups will have multiple rounds, and then they will adjust their valuation or their cap for that reason. Really also, yeah, depend on the market condition. Right now, yeah, the market condition is not as good as compared to 2 3 years ago.
Mm. No,
Really
and one of the
changed.
things I liked, and maybe circling back to one of your earlier comments, which is, I think that, everybody, or a lot of, not, I always say everybody, and it's hard to say everybody, but a lot of people, they'll say, well, we're just different. There is no comparables, and if you're to take the metaverse, well, yeah, that's a new thing, but there are still people, augmented reality has been around for a while. Virtual reality has been around for a while. If you're to take, let's say you were first person that invented a car, and they'll say, well, there is no cars before this. We're the first person. Well, you had bicycles before that. You had horse and buggy. You had trains. And
Mhm.
they're not going to be a perfect fit, and it's not that you're saying if there was a
Yeah.
perfect fit, that means somebody else is already doing your business. But you do want to look at those
Mhm.
comparables that I think give you at least an
Yeah.
idea as to what is that size, who might be the
Mhm.
customer market, what is the price they're willing to bear, and then you have to adjust it and say maybe it's different. So I think that's definitely some
One thing I will add is that it might be a different idea, but the problem always the same. What problem are you trying to solve? It can be a new idea, new solution, new technology, right? But the problem is always the same. It might be
hmm.
evolving bigger, more painful, I don't know, impacting more people. For example, there's a lot more problem impacting the environment, right? But the problem itself, I think it's the same.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. And so I think that a good place to always start is what is the problem you're trying to solve? Let's say it was going back to, maybe it's transportation, and you're saying, okay, well, we're going to make transportation easier. Well, who are you competing against? You're going to get, going back
Exactly.
to the car example, you're competing against horse and buggy. How are you different? How are you better? Why would people pay more? Or would they pay more? And would everybody that drives a horse and buggy, would they want a vehicle and those type of things? And then you're going to have to go down and you're going to figure out your addressable market. So I think that's definitely some great ideas as to how you start building your business model and seeing whether or not there is a business model to be had. Now, switching gears just a little bit, and maybe in no particular order, but one of the other kind of things that we'd talked a little bit before, and I think would be interesting to the audience is there's always the idea of operations, but even more so lean operations. They call lean startups or minimally viable product, and there's a lot of different terminologies, and it tends to be sometimes a bit overused because everybody is always using some of those catchphrases or buzzwords. But how do you go about using, when you're looking into operations? So you get a business started, you get it up and running. How do you approach operations in general? And even more so, how do you do it from the kind of the lean concept when you're just starting out?
Right, right. I approach it, yeah, very similarly with investment, right? It's a lot of time. It's all about resource allocation. How much money you have? Where do you want to place? Where do you want to spend the money first, right? Of course,
Mm-hmm.
um, the simple answer is where you get most impact, right? Same thing with lean concept operation. It's operation, yeah, it's more maybe, process improvement, right? When you set up something, it's an investment. And then when you invest on something and you put in the money, you put in the resources, right? How quickly can you realize the results, right? And then how big is the impact of those results, right? I think that's how we approach our finances at Taylor, right? In everything, not just operation, marketing as well, right? Where do we want to allocate our funding? We monitor our finances very closely, right? So we review our spending on a weekly basis, right? So I think when you have the right at least for me, I use the money, the funding as my angle, and then from there you are forced to be lean, right? If you have unlimited money, okay, then yeah, somehow your psychology change, right? You can do whatever, you can spend the money, you can test out 20 different channels of marketing, because it doesn't hurt anything. And operation too, I can have the biggest warehouse, the state of the arts warehouse, the best technology facilities out there, right? But I have no customers,
No,
right?
and and I
So
like the,
money will drive lean.
no, and I think that there's a lot of great advice in there, and I think the one that people oftentimes are, kind of get stuck on a bit is they're saying, well, I need everything, right? I need to have a facility, I need to have an office space, I need to have employees, I need to do marketing, I need to do sales, I need to do product development, I need to do legal, I need to do a website, and all of those things do need to get done at some point. But I think there's a difference between where is currently, as you're at within your budget, where is the best return on your investment? Is it getting a prototype and and getting that up and going, or is it pre-selling it, or is it going to the marketplace, or is it you do need an office space because you have to have a dedicated, and it's, I don't know, or you have to have a website so you can start building awareness, and they're all of them are important and you want to get them all done. But I think you need to, as you highlighted, say, okay, what is the first thing, or where is my best return on investment, and what is going to be most impactful to the business? Let's do that first and then work down the list and get it in place that way. Now,
Yeah.
one of the general questions is, how do you, so we talked a little bit about operations, but within operations, how do you even go about setting it up and running it as a startup? In other words, when you're getting a business going, you don't have the luxury of being in business for multiple years where you have systems in place, how it's done, you've tried it and you've done trial and error. You're getting things figuring out as you're going along. So how do you even go about thinking about how to tackle operations in general?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies out there that you can outsource, a lot of services out there that you can use, that you can engage, right? Because, trying to set up everything from scratch is very capital intensive. You don't want to invest in something that, while you are still trying to figure out the product market fit, right? While during the journey, there'll be a lot of pivoting, right? So when you pivot, your operation setup will change, right? Why do you want to invest in building something that you're not even sure, on day one? So yeah, I definitely will advise outsource as much as you can,
Mm.
right? And use whatever, yeah, services out there that you can use. For us at Taylor, it doesn't make sense for us to have a warehouse on day one, right? It doesn't make sense for us to set up a laundry facility on day one. That's very expensive setup, right? We don't want to spend 50% of first fundraising on setting up the operation. Just doesn't make sense. We do want to spend the money in acquiring customers. So what we did is, yeah, we partner with laundry companies. There's so many companies that we can work with, right? Work with them. We use their space. We don't have the space. We can use their space. So you just have to be creative, in how you use resources, locate resources, and including administrative services, right? So I'm talking about your physical infrastructure, warehouse, for example. But same thing with employees, right? So you know, we can't have 10 people full time on day one, right? But we can definitely outsource. You know, there's a lot of offshores, even here, you know, within the United States, there's a lot of a platform out there you can use, right? You don't have to do everything on your own. You might as well spend your time finding customer, figuring out, you know, the product market fits, you know, continue to improve in your revenue model and business model, right? Everything else outsource. Yeah.
Mm. No, and I think that, I think that's a lot of great advice. Now, the one caveat I'll give is, at least
Mhm.
for me, and my observing doing startups and small business and watching others, is you have to be careful when you outsource so you get good people to you outsource to. In other words, usually the reason you're outsourced is either one, you can't afford it, or two, it's not in your area of expertise. And you're saying, hey, we don't want to invest or do that all in house right now. We're going to wait or we're going to start out outsourcing it. Maybe as we get big enough, then we'll start to do that. We'll start to bring it in house. But I think what you have to be careful is sometimes you just jump to, well, I'll just go find someone else that outsources it. And because it's not in your area of expertise, a lot of times you make as many mistakes. You go find someone to build a website. Well, you don't know how to build a website. You don't know what a good website design and practice is. So you just go find the first person that's on, that says I can build a website. Maybe it works out great, but just as often it doesn't. Or warehouse and fulfillment, and maybe they aren't really set up to take returns, or they don't really do it very timely, and those type of things. And so then it creates those issues. So I think just because you're outsourcing, it doesn't mean you don't need to do a bit of due diligence and
Yeah.
seeing if they have a good reputation and a good reviews
Yeah.
and good experience, and talk with their other customers to make sure that it's a good fit.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's one of the mistakes we make is yes, it's good to outsource, but you're definitely right. And if you don't work with the right company, you actually ended up spending more time and money. Okay. Finding another new company to work with. So it's important to find the right company for us. Yeah, we just talk to different founders, right? Talk to, you know, our investors communities. Yeah, make sure that they've already done the due diligence for you. They work with the companies, right? So you can just jump right in. You don't have to go through the painful process with new people.
No, and I think that's a great takeaway. And I said it's just one where you have to be careful. I think that our outsourcing is absolutely a great way as you're building the business, but you just can't simply just turn the reins over to someone that you have no
Exactly.
familiarity with, and you just use it as an excuse. Well, I'll have someone else do it, because it can be just as expensive or even worse than if you did it
Yes.
yourself. And so you always have to keep an oversight. So
Yes.
now, as we've kind of gone through the a few of the items, and we're already starting to reach towards the end of the podcast, and there's plenty more things we could touch on. But I always like to wrap up each episode with one question. So we'll jump to that one now, which is, within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
I think the fashion industry has, you know, it's evolving, right? So, and we know that at least for Taylor, our business model is more circular, right? The circular fashion is it's a new buzzwords where the fast fashion, you know, it's a scene, right? So it's changing. We see that just changing, and then so in the past, you know, companies or big brands, they will use sustainable initiative, you know, as part of their branding strategy. It's no longer the case, right? So now you see a lot of big brands, they have to it have to be part of the business strategy, their regular business strategy. They have to address the environmental issues. They have to provide more sustainable option, you know, to
Mm,
their consumers, even introducing buyback programs, right? And another big change in the industry is the metaverse, right? The metaverse is going to change, you know, all industries, a lot of industry, including fashion industry, right? It will change how people shop, think about fashion. It
mm,
will it will change, you know, and for example, yeah, before you buy anything, right, you can have an avatar, you can shop anywhere, anytime in the world, you can try them on, you know, and then you can have very accurate, reliable information about the products, who make them, right, and you can make the best I think conscious decision whether or not you want to engage with this brand, right, and play a part in saving the environment too. And then throughout the whole development process, right? So because in the traditional fashion industry, sampling, it's very wasteful, a lot of overproduction, right, in the development process, design process. But with the metaverse, the technology continue to advance. Well, we will be able to design something, right, produce something, of course, virtually, and then predict the demand, right, before we produce anything, that will be very wasteful. Like that's why fashion industry is one of the most pollutive industry. So yeah, I'm hopeful that's why that's Taylor's mission is to play a part in saving the environment through the circular model, rental and resale.
No, and I think that's a great myth. And if I were to take that even, the myth to dispel even one step further, I think, sometimes people get into, a preconceived way that it's done or a preconceived notion, and then they anticipate what's coming in the future and they don't understand it. And then it leaves you vulnerable. So I think that that's a great myth to dispel and some great takeaways. Well, as people want to reach out to you, if they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. Go to our website, Taylor.style. Taylor spelled as TAELOR .style, STYLE. And you can find us there. And then our email is hi@taylor.style.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out to you, connect up with you, and find out more. And if nothing else, make a new best friend. Well, thank you again, Phoebe, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of your listeners that are out there, if you can help us to share this expertise with as many startups and small businesses as we can, just go and click share, subscribe, and leave us a review so that all those startups and small businesses can find out all this great expertise. Now, on that note, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Phoebe, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, Devin, for having me.